What's going on, everybody? Got a tutorial for you today here with the PlayStation 2 Fat Console. Let me turn this around for your perspective. Today we're going to be dealing specifically with controller issues. Now, really, I'm going to be focusing on the controller port, but we are going to have a little disclaimer here that I'm going to go through a few things here at the beginning, kind of like troubleshooting things, especially because this can be a trickier issue than you realize, and very common too. Because believe it or not, this plastic that's used for these consoles and inside here for the controller port can actually get really brittle in a lot of different circumstances, and it can snap a lot of the pieces in there. There's multiple things on these controller port, memory card port that is prone to failure. So it is something that's seen a lot. It's not a difficult issue to tackle at all. There's not going to be any soldering, even the most extreme repairs and stuff to get this working again. Anybody's going to be able to do this repair. If you can turn a screwdriver, you're going to be able to pull this off. So first and foremost, we need to have a quick discussion to make sure that we're on the same page. You know, if you've got a PS2 console, you know, you plug in your controller, and try to play a game or try to navigate the menu and it just doesn't work, you should not assume that it's the controller, and you shouldn't assume that it's the controller port inside the console. A few things, unless you know that specifically something happened and you know that affected it. One thing you could do is, if you've got a controller, inspect the wire first. Okay. If you see any, a lot of times it can be right here where it's connected. And again, this is like a third party, but same applies. Or a lot of times it'll happen right here near the plug-in for the actual console. You'll see like frayed wires. You can see like, different color wires popping out, and it's not straight like this. If your controller's not working and then you notice something like that on your controller, I mean, it's not a guarantee that the controller is your issue, because I do have controllers, that have that issue, but they still work. But yeah, it's a really good idea to just try another one, get a new controller first. I know that, you may not want to spend the money, but you're going to have to make sure it's not your controller itself, because you could go and get all the parts and do all this stuff to try to fix the console side of things, just to find out, actually, it looks like my controller's bad. Obviously, a good way to, if you've got a second controller, test the second controller, plug it in and see if it works. If it works fine, but this one doesn't work fine, then it's a pretty good indicator that your controller was the issue, not the console. Next off, if you, for whatever reason, you've tested it, you've done what I just said, or you just know that controller is a working controller, your next thing you want to do is switch ports. So if you're doing it like this, you've got it plugged into port number 1. You just can't get nothing to happen. Take a quick second and switch it to the second plug. That's not going to work for a lot of games, because a lot of games require the first. But what you can do is, once the console boots up and it's not in a game, you can at least navigate the menu. You can navigate the menu, click some of the menu buttons on there, and if it's working in the second one and not the first one, then obviously it's your controller port itself is bad. Next off, a quick indicator of something you can look at. Obviously, right here where you plug these in, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these get really brittle, and people are not nice to their things. So ripping those controllers out, or maybe you pulled it too far back and ripped it out, that can actually break all these plastic bits in here. And those plastic bits you see right here actually have the containers for the connections for each of the connections the controller needs. So if you break or crack any of this, it's almost a guarantee that you're not going to be able to get it to work. So look in here, make sure it looks like what you're seeing right here. I have another controller port right here I'm going to show you. This is like a real obvious one. You see, this is the part that you can see from the outside of the console, and as you can clearly see, all the plastic on this one is just gone. All you see are the connection they're not really wires, but this is what's inside of those ports, and it's going to be impossible to get that to work. Not to mention the fact that if whatever happened to this, do this, it could have damaged something back here in the back too if it had too much pressure. So the whole port could just be damaged in general. So that's going to be your biggest and most obvious thing, is replacing this, especially if you've got damage right here. Like if you see some damage down in there like that, then definitely, obviously, that's what you have to do. You have to replace this. What we're going to do, though, is I am going to just show you how to do it real quick. It's really easy. We're just going to take the console and flip it upside down. If you've got like a small flathead, kind of like this, this is a little jewelry size. We're going to start prying all the feet out. There's one already missing here on this console, and I haven't even opened this one yet. I just know that the controller ports on this one don't work at all. So we're going to get those pried up. And then obviously it's just a regular Phillips head screwdriver. So then we're going to get all these out. And then real quick, too, if you have one of the original, the 3001 models, some of those you'll actually have additional screws right here in the front. I believe it's two, one right here. So you have to peel up those little covers there, too, and take out the screws. And we're just going to take all these screws out. It's a good idea. Make sure you've got a good place for your screws because they're easy to lose. So you want to have like a general area where you're putting all that stuff to keep it, where it should be. These ones are a pain to get out because they're so low. You got to kind of pry them out a little bit. Sometimes you can just flip the console over and they'll drop out, but sometimes they don't want to and you'll have to pry them out like that. So now we've got all that. We're going to double check. It actually looks like, yeah, this console is actually still sealed. So we're actually going to break the seal on this. So you can see kind of the pattern I'm making here. That's where you have to kind of cut it. And again, this is just a flathead screwdriver. I wouldn't use a knife or anything. I mean, just in case you accidentally slip or something, you could cut into something. But we cut these out to break the seal. And all we're doing is we're kind of like rotating the back of the case off. The front of the case is mostly staying in place. Don't try to just rip this thing out, okay? You want to be very gentle while you're taking this off because in most cases, your front buttons are attached to the top case piece with a ribbon, and if you go trying to peel this off too quick and you're not very careful, you're going to rip that out, damage the cable, and now you've got another problem to deal with. So what we're doing is we're kind of rotating it up, and we're kind of shimmying it this way, and you see it popped out. There's usually a sticker right here. Kind of peel that off so you're not pulling on that ribbon. I like to go ahead and take it out of the case. So I've got that flathead we were using earlier. You just kind of stick it under the bottom of the power button here and kind of pry it a little bit, and then you'll see it kind of snaps out. It's just a lot easier to handle when it's not got the case there. Luckily, you may not even have to do that, but I always do that out of habit. So now you can see we've got the controller port exposed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take out the two screws. And that's going to loosen up our controller port. So we're going to get that out. Now, as far as getting a controller port, like, if you've already established that this is damaged, what you're going to do to replace it is, technically these all kind of work together, but they are just slightly designed differently where one or two versions will fit into one or two other versions, then one or two versions won't fit into this one version. So your best bet is when you get to this point, pull it out and look back here. These little metal prongs right here are the one thing that's always different. Sometimes they're longer than this, and then instead of having a right angle on these little prongs, they kind of lightly curve. Some of them, it's like just like these, but there's only those aren't there. There's only these four here. make sure you get one that matches the pattern of these spokes to guarantee, because you could accidentally buy one for the wrong version, but it just so happens to fit. But there are a couple of little weird design flaws on the Fat, where some of these will not fit unless it looks exactly like this. So don't take the chance and just buy any of them. Pay close attention to that picture. If you find one of these for sale to replace it and it doesn't have a good picture of the back, either ask for a picture of the back or don't buy it, because you could be buying something that won't fit. Otherwise, if it wasn't for some of these and how big the PCB is right here, they would fit across the board. Now, the next thing, obviously, we're attached to a ribbon, as you've seen. This is the second part we're going to touch on with this. If you are positive that it's the controller port, etc., all you have to do is there's just a little clip right here. You can just slide your fingernail under it. It's basically a locking clip. Now, be careful, because if you break that, then, you screw it up too. But again, if that's broke, who cares? And then you can pull it out. So don't just yank that out. It's got that lock clip. And then, once you reinstall it, you just put it back in there, and then you just flip it back over again. Once you're at this point, right, you're almost going to have to replace this, even if you're not 100% sure what the issue is. Like, you don't see any obvious damage. A lot of times, if one controller port works, but one of them doesn't, it's almost always the controller port. However, there is a small possibility that it's the ribbon itself. This would be rare, and every single time you've got an issue with the ribbon, it's going to be an operator error, which means, somebody ripped this thing out, somebody just tried to jam it in something, whatever. So what you're going to do, just to be sure, is you want to kind of just visually inspect this ribbon. Yes, the ribbon is flexible and it moves, and you'll see some little like lines and stuff. Those are usually just like bubbles in it and stuff. But if you see one that's got damage, where you can see, exposed traces and stuff like that instead of the cover on it, or if you see where it looks like, somebody's tried to take it and fold it into a paper airplane, where you got really, deep, in fact, I got one I can show you what I mean, where I won't damage that one. Let me see here. This one right here is one that was already not working. So, if you see one where it looks like somebody just took it and bent it in half, and, it's got that really tight crease in it, like I said, like they're trying to fold it like it's almost origami or something, that right there can cause the traces inside to break. Now, luckily, these are pretty tough. So most people, aren't going to have to worry about this. That's why, like, if these are messed up, it's because somebody mishandled it. So before you automatically buy the controller port replacement, definitely check out the ribbon. And, if you see anything obvious where it's like, sometimes I've seen it where the surface of it is all scratched off, kind of like this, where you could tell somebody just jammed it in there. Obviously, you're going to have to replace this ribbon as well. Sometimes you can find them with the ribbon included. Sometimes you can't. You have to buy them separate, because who knows, your controller port could be damaged and the ribbon could be screwed up, because, somebody could have already tried to fix the controller port and then screwed it up by damaging this as well. So it could be both. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, you're wanting to check this, because that way it's obvious, like, oh, look, this ribbon is obviously damaged. That's going to have to also be replaced. Otherwise, like for the vast majority of us, replacing the controller port itself is going to be your problem. Because again, if you pull to rip this out of here, and you didn't know it was like this, and the ribbon kind of ripped or something, you're going to know that that's damaged. And even if it's a console where you just found it somewhere, like at a Goodwill, you're still probably going to see signs. It's really rare, because they made the controller ports like crap, but at least the ribbons are pretty sturdy. And really, that's about it. Once you get the port or the ribbon, you're not going to have any other issues. Luckily, all these, have the PCB on the board, and that's all the the controls for the controller and the memory card and stuff. You can see it's got chips and stuff on there. So if anything that deals with the controller port goes bad, it's almost always going to be this port. If you replace the port, and you still have the same issues with the controller not working. Again, make doubly sure that the controller isn't messed up. Or even if you've got a ribbon that looks okay, assume that that also means that this ribbon is bad and you need to replace it as well. Because it is possible something could be wrong with it that you can't see that's really obvious. So you may want to replace that too. But after you replace that and the ribbon, um, that's going to solve all your issues with that, assuming the controller is good, of course. Additionally, I am going to put a link in the description, so make sure you check down in the description. If there is anybody that needs these controller port replacements, remember, just when you go to that link, find the one that looks like the one you have, and yeah, make sure you get the one you need. So otherwise, guys, that's all I got for this tutorial. I hope that helped you guys, got you gaming again. And until next time.